I'm Narelle Todd.
And I'm Essie Susan Smith.
We are the self-publishing author and marketing duo that has sold over 2 million books. But we didn't start out knowing how to sell books. Fast forward past many failed promotions and a lot of lessons learned, you will see how we went from self-publishing newbies to hitting the New York Times bestsellers list and making the USA Today bestsellers list 19 times and counting. We created the Get My Book Out There podcast to give you simple yet effective marketing strategies to increase readership and book sales, so you know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, as well as some tips for staying mentally and physically well.
Let's get started.
And on our podcast today, we're going to talk about we're just going to talk. So we wanted to take a moment and have a chat really about the experience of being an author. So often in our podcasts, we look at, what are the tactics that we can use to improve our author business. And we went, things are a little bit uneven, like it's, yes, tactics are good and we want to build our business and we want to grow our marketing and all of those things. But there's also then the personal side. And that's what we wanted to bring in today was reflect, just have a look back. Susan, how long have you been writing now?
I've been writing since 2012.
Wow. So, 9 or more years, well, nearly 10 years, writing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in that time you've had, the chance to reflect back and just have a think about where you came from, all the stuff that you've learned, but even just the personal experiences of being an author. So let's just have a chat about that.
Okay. It's like getting on a, Space Mountain on Disney, or Splash Mountain, or even worse, Jurassic Park, whatever they call it, or Thunder Mountain. And anyway, I am not a huge roller coaster fan, but being an author can be very much equated to being on a roller coaster.
Yes, because it's in any business, not just the author business, but in any business, we tend to think that it's going to go like this. It's like you go from A to B to C to D, whereas we know that it is the roller
instead of that straight line, you've got all these dips and curves, and it's
Absolutely.
like don't crash.
Yes, yeah, and you think you're going to end up at a certain place, but the actual journey takes you so many different areas and things that you didn't even think you'd end up doing. And I think that's all part of any kind of entrepreneur journey.
Yes.
Is where we think we're going to be is not necessarily where we're going to end up. And that's okay. That's all part of it. And being open to it, I think, is one of the best things that we can do as business owners, is just letting go of some of that rigid of like, well, I'm an author and I'm writing in this genre or, this niche, and we're going to do this. And then it turns out that actually your passion is actually in a different area.
Yes.
And being okay with moving with, like that. Have you come across anything like that in your nearly 10 years?
I definitely had to be much more flexible. It's kind of funny that you say that, because if you do have that timeline, it's not perfectly horizontal from point A to point B. You've got, point A that goes up to point B, which goes down to point C, which goes over to point D, back around to point E. So you have all of these different changes. And, you think, okay, to get from this point to this point, I need to do X, Y, and Z. And then you realize that you forgot all the negative numbers that you've got to work with as well. So, the timeline not only goes through the positive, but it also can go negative at times as well.
Yeah.
And for me, I have to do a lot of self-talking. It's one of those reminders to myself. I say the serenity prayer a lot. My husband just shared another quote from 1927 that is basically a good way to live your life as well. And it's understanding that all of this is not about reaching that end point. It's about the journey. And sometimes the journey kind of veers off the timeline that you've set for yourself. And, just this last week, I kind of experienced that. I was at NINC, which is Novelists Inc., and it's an industry standard convention. But I get overwhelmed when I'm in real large crowds anyway. And, it doesn't help when you're in a large crowd and a pandemic. So, you're kind of like trying to wear a mask, trying to talk to other people. And, you're around all of these other people that are your peers. So you automatically, as a human being, you start trying to compare yourself to them. And, that can be really dangerous to your mental and physical health. So you have to, immediately put a stop to that and say, no, I don't compare myself to anyone but myself. And what goals do I have? Because my goals are not the same as their goals. We're learning about the same, we're doing pretty much the same thing, but overall what we're doing is very individualized, because it's like you said, it's what our heart and desires are about and where our focus and our goals are, and they may not be the same as the author that I'm sending to next. And our business
Yeah.
models aren't the same either.
Yeah.
Whether you're going the traditional path, if you're going a hybrid path, if you're going, KU path, if you're going wide, if you're writing multiple genres, if you're writing only one genre. So as you're doing this, you need to take all of those factors into and weigh them and realize that sometimes you may be trying to compare yourself with apples and oranges, and you don't want to do that.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before around business models in authorland. And it's like there's lots of information about the traditional route, and there's lots of information around KU. But for authors who want to be wide and self-published, there's not necessarily that same kind of information. And so if you do fit into that third category, it can sometimes be a lonely place and kind of a scary place, because I think it all adds to part of the self-doubt of like, well, should I be doing this? Should I, maybe it's almost like the grass is greener on the other side. And, maybe I should just go into KU and just, do that, because everybody seems to be doing so well in KU. And we know, of course, that's not the case. Every business model has stars, and every business model has people who are struggling and working their way to becoming profitable. So the whole idea of comparison, I think, is really tough, particularly if you fit into that self-published wide category, because there's not necessarily as many standouts, authors where you can look at and go,
Yes.
okay, I'll base myself or see what they're doing, and what can I incorporate into my business. And that's a really tough one from a mindset point of view.
And you have to realize that even if you go and you look at them and you say, hey, they're doing great, why am I not doing that great? Well, technically, you may be doing just as well or better than they are. And there's never any guarantee that if you mimic someone exactly, that you're going to have that same success.
Yeah.
There's always going to be those outliers. And whether or not you're that outlier, you need to be okay with that. It can't be that constant beating yourself up. One of the talks that they had there, I thought was very, very valuable. And you've pointed this out so many times, and it just, reaffirmed to me. And that is, have that balance in your life. Take that time, appreciate who you are, embrace your positives and what you're capable of doing. And if you do that and you embrace that positive and you pull it towards you, you're going to feel much better. Your blood pressure is not going to be as high. Your stomach's not going to be as upset. So sorry, Tums. If everyone did that, we'd have to give up our stock in you. So, I mean, for me, I went and I thoroughly enjoyed just being around other authors and talking shop, talking business. But I also enjoyed the quiet time, where I was able to just sit and reflect on who I am and what is my place in the universe. And I actually did this sitting out on the beach, because Nink is on the beach in St. Pete. And one night I just went out and I sat down on the benches that they have out there and stared up at the stars, discovered that Venus is in Libra right now. Didn't know that until I got my star app out. And just gazed up at the stars and breathed deeply and appreciated everything that I had. My ability to write beautiful stories. I just tried to focus on all of the wonderful things that I've done over the last almost 10 years and the wonderful adventures that I've been able to go on. And that helps kind of reground you
Yeah.
and makes you realize, okay, I can do this. I don't have to give up. There was times where it's like, oh, I might as well just give up. Obviously, I don't know anything, which is not true. I know a lot. And I'm doing a lot. And, but you get overwhelmed by,
Yeah.
thinking, oh, what is it they say? Keeping up with the Joneses, trying to keep up with the author next door. And you're not that author next door, you're yourself.
Yeah.
So I think there was another presentation where they were talking about getting books to film. And the presenter's name was Maggie Marr, and she was fabulous. It was really interesting listening to her. And one of the things that she kept showing was a mountain. And it's like, there's hundreds of ways to get up that mountain, and some of them are going to be easier than others. And she says, but, and then when you get to the top of the mountain, you realize that you're not at the top. Clouds clear, and there's the rest of the mountain to still go. And that's the way it is. You may have your outliers that, are able to do it and make it seem so easy. But Steve and I were talking about Muhammad Ali today, and he was talked about how he reinvented himself. At 22, he won the title, and then he got it taken away, and then he fought and he won it again, and then he lost, and then then he fought again and he won. And it was the fact that he didn't give up. He just kept going. Even when he had the beginnings of Parkinson's, he kept going. He didn't give up. And that's motivation like that is what helps me get over my negative numbers.
I definitely think having an attitude of gratitude is just vital in all areas of life, but especially in business, because it helps us look at what we have and what we have achieved and all the great things that, that we're surrounded by, the people that we're surrounded by. I can't believe the people that I've met in this business, and I'm so thankful for those. And I think that kind of attitude is necessary, but the resilience muscle, oh my gosh. I even know just in my own business, building that resilience muscle it just takes you to another step, and another level. And each time you think, oh, this is it, I'm going to give up. If you hang in there, it gets better. And you're so much stronger then for the next stage, because as you say, every time you set a goal, you get to that goal, but then it's like there's another goal that you're going to set on top of that. So the mountain, you never actually do climb the mountain, because there's always something else that's going to be there that you need to do. Or we never go straight from the very bottom right to the top. Well, one or two people might, but most of us have to meander our way up that mountain, setting goals as we go. And, we reach that point, celebrate it, and then move on to the next one and just keep building that resilience. That's
And
so
I think
important.
in a way that makes us better capable than someone who shoots straight to the top. While that sounds fabulous, everyone thinks, oh, I would love to do that. I can't tell you how many times I've heard since the lottery began where people win all this money and 3 years later they're declaring bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Because they don't have that resilience. They don't have that, they haven't learned the processes along the way and had faced those challenges. So they're unprepared for that success. And that was one of the things when I, the night that I hit that enter button, I realized that I was ready for failure because it wouldn't change my life. But I needed to find out whether or not I was ready for success. And, when you're doing that night, I sat there and I thought about how would my life change if my writing became successful?
Yeah.
And I not only had to, start saying, well, I would have this and this and this and this and this, and it could change, my career, it could change my family life, it could, do all of these things. And then I had to ask myself, am I prepared for that? And if not, how can I get myself prepared for it?
Yeah. A friend of mine writes she calls it a protocol, but it's really just a list of things. So if she, for example, would be if she was to win the lotto, then she's got a protocol. So it's like, where would she spend the money? Who would she use to invest it with? She's got it all worked out. So she said when it happens, and it's always when it happens, not if, when it happens, she's ready. and she said it just takes so much pressure off because, as you say, so many people who win, was it 99% or something? People
Yeah.
who win, anyway, a huge number who win within a couple of years have nothing, because they've
Yes. And they
squandered
end
it,
up
lost.
losing everything because even the stuff they had before, they've lived beyond their means. And
Yeah,
then, because they're used to this, and then they end up losing it all because they can't afford to pay to maintain even what they've purchased. And sometimes just having material stuff is stressful.
oh, for sure.
It's like decluttering your life. And when you're an author, there's a lot of clutter in it.
Yeah, yeah,
You've constantly got a million and one things that you need to do. And writing always seems to be the last thing on the list because you've got all these other business things that you need to take care of. And yet the writing is the most enjoyable part. It's also the most time consuming. And some ways it's the easiest and the most difficult because you need to get lost in that world, which means you need to shut everything else out.
yeah. And it's the reason you started your business, was
And
to
it's
write.
and it's the reason I began writing because I was looking for stories that about characters that I wanted to read about and doing adventures and worlds that I dreamed of, and I was getting more and more frustrated because I was having trouble finding that perfect mix of characters, that balance. So for me I did it for my own pleasure. And I thought that and then other times I'm like, why would anyone read my books? And that's where the self-doubt comes in. I'm not a
Yeah,
very good writer. If I was a great writer, I would be doing, 100 times better than what I am. And then that's where that self-doubt and listening to other people and comparing the apples and the oranges and realizing, oh, no, that's all that negative stuff. And I basically want shut the door, push it out, shut the door, lock it. It's like, no, you're not coming in. I'm not going to let you drown me.
yeah,
And that's where and if you hit bottom, just think of all the stuff that you've learned and rebuild yourself. I constantly go back to some of the outliers who have hit that bottom and they've turned around and they've reinvented themselves. Muhammad Ali, Walt Disney, so many great outliers. And I just wanted to be a woman.
I love the point you raised there about accepting yourself and accepting what you write.
Yes.
A friend of ours, an author, has for years now been apologizing for the fact that she writes romances, but they're not open door.
There's
The door
yeah.
very firmly shuts. You might get a kiss or so, but nothing, too much more than that. And her books are just fantastic, and I've loved, love reading them. But has been coming from this place of like, oh, I don't write sexy, so it's
Apologetic.
yes,
And there's no
yes,
reason to be apologetic.
yes,
The pages are burning, but they're burning
yeah.
with the action and adventure and the humor mixed all in with them. And by the time you get to the end of them, you're like, I didn't miss that there wasn't sex there because I was so involved in everything else going in it. And I
And
think
yeah, watching
owning
her
that.
transition, yes, watching her transition to actually owning it. And it's almost like she's gone from the shadows of like, oh, I can't say anything because my books aren't sexy, to now she's stepping into the spotlight, and she's just like, she's out there and proud that her stories are sweet
Yeah.
or not sexy, or whatever the words you want to call them. And that's so amazing. And I think for if every author can do that and accept what they are and what they write, and part of that is not comparing yourself to other people, saying these are my stories, this is what I excel in, here, go read. There's power in that you will never find through any marketing tactic. You could do all the same things that we've suggested, but that the belief in your own stories is, well, it is a marketing tactic in and of itself. Yeah.
Well, one of the things, and it's funny that we're talking about this because I mentioned this last week to a group of authors, and I'm like, if you don't love your books, if you don't embrace your books, then why should the readers? If you don't value your books at a price that they should be valued at, then that's going to come off to the readers, and they're going to think that they shouldn't value it as much. And so these are all, yes, you have to constantly tell yourself this. Yes, you've got to constantly remind yourself, but it's empowering as well, because as you're doing that, you're building your own resilience and getting into that habit. That's a big thing. It's the habit of thinking, yes, my books are worth it. Yes, I write this and I'm proud of it. I write sci-fi romance. I'm not ashamed that I write sci-fi romance. I love the stories. I love the action adventure. I love writing about other worlds, dreaming of the possibilities, So when you embrace it, it's like pumping yourself up before a good fight,
And I think that's a brilliant note to leave our chat on. Go pump yourself up.
Go pump yourself up.
Yeah, you just encapsulated everything we just said. You're beautiful. Yeah. So everyone, I hope this has been helpful. A bit of a wander through what Susan's experienced as an author in the past nearly 10 years, and it's been wonderful being here beside her, just watching the stuff that she does. It's amazing. So believe in your stories, build your resilience muscle, get an attitude of gratitude, and just keep climbing that mountain, going for goal after goal after goal. Yeah.
And reaching for the gold.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep going for it, definitely. Okay, well, we'll end it there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. We've got way more information we want to share with you to increase your book sales. So please come and join me at facebook.com. Get my book out there.